sense that he had a chance there. Big game, and an even bigger game to conclude the 3-minute portion. Amon, the bullet is going to be one of the most epic match segments I think we're ever going to see.
It really will. And, there's obviously it could be said about any match. There's a difference between going in with the score tied or one player has the lead. But between these two guys where, there's never really been that much of a difference between them, that 1 point, that one game, a half a point makes all the difference. So, yeah, you could talk about momentum, but strictly based on the score and how narrowly close these matches have been, yeah, this game's important.
You're totally right, and this is giving me shades of the Nakamura MVL match where Hikaru was down by 2 going into the final game of this portion, and he managed to win it, and that really set the tone. Now, obviously, he dominated all across the bullet, but if Magnus could tie the match here, man, would that go a long way toward filling him with a lot of momentum. And right now, this is resembling last year's match where the score going into the bullet, I think, was something like a 1 or 2 point lead only for Hikaru. We have transformation here in the Rui Lopez. Hikaru has put his knight on e7 as opposed to f6, as has been standard in their games thus far.
Yeah, and also the trade on e5, I think the position last time we saw this featured, some rather strange like knight a5, b5 sorts of positions. Instead, this one is much more calm all around. And I think Magnus is probably happy here with a stable position that he knows he could not be worse in, especially as the final game in this segment. It feels like a position where if you want to draw to go to the bullet, Nakamura would certainly acquiesce. So, Magnus's game to play, it looks like.
For sure. And Hikaru has to decide on which side of the board he's going to operate. b5 is a tempting move, but you're also introducing long-term weaknesses on the queen side. As we know, white will have the typical a2, a4 strike. You can go on the other side, and I think the move Hikaru's turning over in his head is actually g5, potentially even followed by f5. But that also allows avenues to be opened up, such as the queen dropping back to b3 with a check. I'm definitely surprised at the move c6. That is ultra committal and ultra risky because look at the d6 pawn.
Totally. Yeah, this immediately makes me think of like the direct approach. Rook d1, the pawn is loose and pinned, so the queen has to sidestep, but it introduces options for white to play queen b4, bishop g3, e5 with the right amount of pressure on the e7 square. This can turn very dangerous and some really basic moves that Magnus needs to play, right? These aren't like, out of these world moves. It's like rook a d1. Let's go.
And I'm surprised he's not playing them. He's taking a large chunk of his time here. Obviously, he's figuring out the right way to arrange his pieces, but I would just start with rook d1 and bishop g3 and then think he's played it. He's got so many easy ways to increase the pressure on the pawn. Bishop g3, queen b4, double rooks on the d file. He could do all 3 of those successively. Instead, he expands first on the king side. That's such a typical Magnus move. Again, playing on both sides of the board. It's been a theme of this match. It's a theme featuring in all high-level matches and games.
Yeah, and this actually not only maybe has the idea of h5 in the future, but it really restricts black from that g5 idea. g5, f5 no longer exists. There's no g5, knight g6, and black could maybe try to play for the e5 square. So the knight on e7 is restricted. Maybe it's going to be reduced to knight c8, which is purely a defensive task.
And knight c8 relinquishes the grip on the f5 square. So Magnus perfectly timing the move h5. Hikaru doing everything possible to avoid playing g5 and allowing that knight on f3 to sink its teeth into the delicious f5 square. I think you have to go g5, though. By hook or by crook, you have to keep the f5 square protected. And after white plays knight d4, the problem is that the rook loses contact with the d6 square. So black actually can return to e7 with the knight. Hikaru still holding on.
Yeah, the knight on c8 is like, it's actually the only thing keeping him in the game because it's guarding the d6 pawn, and when the f5 square is threatened, it's guarding the f5 square. So without that knight on c8, big problems in this position for Hikaru. It looks easy for Magnus to play, but he's offered maybe a trade.
And Hikaru could have snagged that knight off the board. Now he doesn't have that chance anymore. He also could have tried d5, but I think Hikaru is actually comfortable with this pawn structure. He's telling himself, Magnus is burning a lot of clock, and he hasn't found a way to win the d6 pawn yet. Let's just kind of keep the status quo, and maybe Magnus will overpress.
I don't know if that's the way to do it, though, because you want to play d5, but I think you're going to need to recapture with a pawn there.
Agreed. And instead he's gone b5, sending the knight either back to e3, and again we're going to see this knight e7 classic, but knight a5 is also very tempting, attacking that new target on c6. That's a more Magnus-esque move, I think. No, he drops back to e3. Okay.
I think knight e7, rook d, d2, d3. He goes on a light square, just good practice there. And after d5, he wants to play rook d1, and the pawns are going to find themselves on fixed dark squares for a potential endgame, maybe with just dark square bishops.
But d4, Hikaru slides his pawn through. b4, preventing c5. What a move. Obviously, the knight is untouchable there because the rook on d7 will hang. And Magnus keeping the status quo here with a3. He could have taken a5, but I think he's trying to surround the d-pawn with the move knight e3 to c2, which is a big threat, by the way.
Yeah, and the moves here that are possible, knight d5, just to showcase the pure insanity of how many things are hanging in that position. f5 has a similar idea.
Knight c2 there would have picked off the d4 pawn. I think that was a big miss by Magnus. He takes the pawn on f5 instead, but Hikaru's rook could... Oh my gosh. No, there's rook takes g7 in the end, and bishop e5, bishop b2, but the king could sidestep.
But you could go to f8. I'm
bishop
looking
d6.
At pawn takes.
Bishop d6. Amazing. We're going to have to show this after the game, or... Hikaru might play the move. No.
The time is too low. We have to stay with the action. Now it doesn't exist anymore.
That was an insane line, Amon. We promise to show this after the game. No matter how the game finishes, feels like Magnus is in the driver's seat. He can support the f-pawn with g4.
That's very scary. Remember, bishop d4, rook d8. You can't just rush and take that.
And that's why Magnus, bringing his king up to e2, supporting the rooks, playing for a win,
Hikaru's
supporting
in
the
big
pawn.
trouble.
Big trouble. Yeah. Also on the clock, he's got 7 seconds and so many weaknesses to defend here.
Yeah, the king is going to be improved, maybe all the way over to b3.
BC. Just take it and take it.
And
oh, he didn't take d4.
You do walk into a permanent pin, but he doesn't want to do it.
But bishop takes d4, threatened, and bishop f6 there was easy. Magnus allowing Hikaru to get active again.
Good point.
Rook c8.
Rook b6 is coming, though.
Okay, now it's suddenly a 3-result game again. I mean, Magnus could lose control of this game and let that d-pawn through.
Ooh, that I didn't expect. That looks like a good move. Rook a5. It's not hanging.
What a move. Rook b6, maybe surround the b-pawn. And now a trade. Check first.
It looks like keeping both rooks on the board was maybe more dangerous.
Uh-oh.
King d3. Oh, the king comes up.
Rook b7, sending the king back, and Magnus has to find a way to infiltrate Hikaru's blockade. Oh, rook e2. D3. Oh my gosh.
Who has to be careful here?
Oh my goodness. Rook f2, and he's going to win the f3 pawn, and I think Hikaru might hold this.
Yep, because if the rook could get to e4, that would be different.
And Hikaru holding the e-file. He cannot let the king infiltrate e6.
Oh, this is incredible. He's hanging on by an actual thread.
And he's doing it incredibly well. He just goes rook e1, rook e2. I don't think Magnus has an easy way to make progress. If you're Carlsen,
King d6, rook e4.
Be careful where you put your pieces.
Yeah, rook g4 was too risky, though. I agree with Hikaru. Stay on the e-file, and that's your defensive method.
And I think we're going to get a draw. Magnus just not finding a single way to pose further problems. I don't think such a way exists. He can't put anything on the e-file. Hikaru's too solid.
I think rook b4 is a reasonable try. Yeah. Bring the rook here, so at least that's taken care of, but he does it in a moment when bishop e7 can be played.
Bishop d4, rook d1, pinning the bishop, moving the king back. Magnus keeps finding newer and newer ways to pose new problems, but Hikaru believes the rook endgame is drawn, and it is.
Especially with the king cut off this way. If the king was on d4, different story. Why did he let it out?
He's got his king to f6, and Magnus is going to win.
Oh, no, he's lost.
King g6, f6. It's over.
It's an umbrella. He's using the pawns as a shield. This is a loss. Oh, my goodness.
How many turnarounds? f7 there was winning on the spot, as does this.
And it's actually the presence of the pawn that makes it a win, because otherwise black can play rook takes f6, check, and stalemate.
And Hikaru is annoyed. He's irritated, and he has lost a critical game, allowing Magnus to tie the match. I'll give you the choice